Out there. It is July 30th, 2020, and this is the weekly Backdrop Developer Meeting where we talk about the current issues that are in Backdrop from a developer perspective. And we highlight issues that are currently being active and worked on. So let's see. First off, let's start with some introductions. I'll start. My name is Nate Lampton. I'm a core committer for Backdrop, and I'm coming from Oakland, California. Greg, can you introduce yourself?
Yep, Greg, I'm joining from Grace. Try to attend every weekly meeting to see how I can help with the issue.
I'll just go ahead. My name is Tim Erickson. I'm St. Paul Tim. My company is Triplo, and I'm coming to you from Deerwood, Minnesota, and I'm sitting next to the ducks today.
Very nice. Let's see. Normally we have updates from the PMC here. I'm going to bring up something that's not in the agenda written, at least, and that's that we're currently working on renewing our trademark, which is pretty exciting. We are pursuing using the Software Freedom Conservancy. One of the services they provide is stewardship of trademarks. And right now, the trademark of Backdrop CMS is held by myself and Jen. And we're working on transitioning that into the Software Freedom Conservancy as basically like the holding organization for the trademark. And it's not like giving away our trademark to like some other entity. It's making it so that we have an organization that can provide continuity for holding the trademark on behalf of the Backdrop community. So just like storing our financial funds with the Software Freedom Conservancy, they also can provide this service of making it so that you can have transitions and rotations in your community leadership and have one group continuous through the entire life of the software project. So that's an interesting thing. We have a whole year at least to get that renewed. The United States trademark law says that you have to renew in between the 5th and 6th year of having acquired a trademark. And so it's been about 5 years ago since we got the trademark. So we have at least a whole nother year to get that all sorted out. But it's an interesting thing. I'm excited to see us expand the use of the Software Freedom Conservancy and get more connected with the organization there.
Nice update, Nate, and thanks for sharing that with the community, the trademark. Appreciate that.
Yep.
All right, let's see. Yeah, I feel kind of silly because I'm the one not on the project management committee between the 3 people here in this meeting. But I have been seeing those emails go through because I'm tied into that.
Yeah, and you were on the project management committee, so.
And you're directly involved since the trademark is on your name, so you will find out eventually. So
that's correct. Also funny, the way the trademarks work is that renewing a trademark, transferring a trademark, all that is really involved is as the current holder, you just don't protest if someone else files the same trademark, which is slightly dangerous because that means anybody anytime could file a trademark for the same thing. And if you don't contest it, then you'll lose your trademark to whoever filed it. And so
how much time do you have to protest to find out?
You've got quite a while, I think like a year. So yeah. And I think you also get notified in the event somebody registers a trademark. They're like, hey, this trademark is being registered again. So, okay. But that doesn't stop a lot of companies from trying to sell you trademark protection services. So I get a fair amount of junk mail regarding that. Okay. Let's see. So in the world of contrib projects, we have some new releases that came out in the past week. Replicate UI, out of stock notification, views conditional, H5P, and editable views all had new releases within the past 7 days. Big thank you to our module maintainers and contributed authors that are regularly updating and working on those contrib modules. I don't have anything for website related updates in the agenda, so I'll skip over that and proceed into the product update. So backdrop 116 is our current release, and we have a number of bug fixes that are pending and getting queued up here for correction. One issue that I keep bringing up that really needs some attention that hasn't gotten any yet is the views or visual regression on the text format order form. It's issue 4407. And we have had a regression in Backdrop 116 ever since release that the list of text formats on that interface is alphabetically displayed instead of being in the correct order. So if you change the order of those things with the drag and drop handles and then save, it looks like nothing happened because they're being displayed in an alphabetical list. I'm sure, I hope it's not a complicated fix whatsoever. It's just one that hasn't gotten any attention yet. So 4407 is that issue. I don't think it's complicated, but it needs a pull request. We had some attention recently to a whole group of like low-hanging fruit issues that have gotten a lot of really great progress on them. So we'll go through each one of these. One of them is setting a reasonable max input vars. That's a PHP setting that controls the maximum number of values that can be submitted through a post request. The issue is 3824. We have a pull request that fixes the PHP setting or via htaccess. It makes a notice on the status report saying, hey, this is too low if that setting doesn't actually take. And it is marked needs review because of a really minor thing. We just need a link to documentation explaining further, like in the status report, we're telling someone you should have a higher value, but then we're not telling them how to change that or why they should change it. And so linking to offsite online documentation is something that still needs to be done. So I think that probably means we have to write the documentation page. I'm guessing that's the big holdup there.
Yep.
Let's see. Next up is reviewing the block title for the search box block. So the search block right now has a title that says search on it, and then there's a label in front of the search field that says search. And so you get a lot of the word search being repeated. The issue 3476 just makes it so that the title is hidden by default for that search block. The pull request has been filed for quite some time. It just needs some eyeballs on it. It's currently marked needs review. Okay. Next up is a issue with views. I'm not sure about this one being particularly easy, but the issue is 3415. Views has some strange behavior when ORing together filters, and that has a pull request that is currently marked needs review. So I think that all this really needs is usability testing to check to see, reproduce the problem as it's described in the issue, and then see if the patch correctly fixes it. And you can do that from the sandbox. So this really just involves some end user testing to check to see if that behavior has been fixed.
Yeah, from memory, I think that there was a respective issue in Drupal, and this was not working as expected at some point, but then the fix that they introduced for Drupal was also committed for Backdrop, and then now this works. Yeah, it needs a little bit more testing and just, yeah, to confirm that everything works as expected.
Okay, another one that was an easy one to fix is that CK Editor was not respecting the language of the site. So if you had your site in German, for example, the CK Editor button toolbar should also be using German words for the hover text when you hover over each one of the buttons. And that was not working. The issue is 4492, but that one was merged in the past week, so it has now been fixed. Let's see, also related, user register is not translated. I'm not quite sure what this is. Oh, literally, the title for the user registration page, like create a new account, is not translated currently because it's missing a T. the T function wrapping around the title, it looks like. I haven't seen that one, but that one is also marked RTBC. It's issue 4493. I like this next issue. Add PHP file syntax highlighting on GitHub. The issue is 4404. And the problem that we have here is that GitHub provides syntax highlighting when you're looking at a file in the web interface, but it only does it automatically for PHP files or .js files or files that have known extensions. Backdrop has a number of files that are PHP files that aren't .php files, like .module files or .install files. And a recent feature enhancement on GitHub was that you can now create a, do you guys know what the name of the file is that makes this possible?
Yep. So if you look at PR,
yeah, I'm trying to find a pull request here. Here we go.
yeah, it's Git attributes, a .git attributes.
Yeah, so just adding a Git attributes file makes it so that you can associate an extension with a particular coding language. So this makes it so the .modules, .install, .test, and .profile files within the Backdrop repository get identified as PHP files. So that's great. Super easy. That's also marked RTBC. Let's see. Next up.
Before we go, just related, I'm not sure if I created an issue for it or not. Moving the README file out of the core issue, sorry, the core folder, so that GitHub picks it up and shows it in the sidebar.
The license file, you mean?
Yes, the license. So I thought that we said.
Is there an issue for that one?
Yeah, I'm just trying to find it. I'm not sure if I filed an issue for it or if I just brought it up last time, but I think that consensus was that it should be okay to do that.
Right. Yeah, that we moved the license file into the core directory when we were removing a bunch of other files that aren't particularly valuable. But now that GitHub specifically parses for license files, we should move our license file to the root so that we get aggregated with other GPL software.
Yeah, I can't find an issue for it. I'll find one. And a pull request. Yeah.
All right. Is it okay if I continue though?
Yep, sure.
Okay. So we've got another really simple issue that everywhere we have path autocompletes whenever you're making a link, for example, like for a menu item, we have path matching that autocompletes for particular items. And this issue, number 4478, makes that path checking less strict. So you can start, you can type the title of a node or something, and it will match on the string that you've typed anywhere within that node's title, rather than you needing to start at exactly the beginning of the node's title. So 4478 is that issue. Gregory and I have been talking back and forth in that issue about whether or not that should be a setting, about how strict the matching should be. My current opinion on that is that we should just go with the looser matching and see what kind of feedback we get. And then if we get feedback saying that this needs to be like adjustable, the level of strictness on the path matching, then we can make it a setting at a later time. Okay, next up, this one that I didn't have time to review before the meeting, but Tim and Gregory both have taken a look at. It's issue 1259. CK editor not saving when it's in source mode. Tim, could you give us the update?
Yeah, so right off the bat, we ought to update that title because we were expecting, but the bug was that when creating a custom block, if you switched to source mode and you made a change and then saved the node, you would lose that change unless you first switched back out of source mode. And we thought that was a CK editor bug, but at the last meeting, it was hypothesized that maybe the problem, because if you create a block that, well, I don't know if we knew this at the time, but we've since confirmed that if you create a block using the custom blocks page where it doesn't use a dialog, that the problem doesn't exist. And it does, so it when you make a custom block, it opens a dialog, and that's where the whole process is taking place. And in that case, this problem does exist. And the additional test that Jen had suggested was trying to edit a text block on the header of a view, because it's the same thing that uses a dialog. And in fact, the problem was there as well. So it's not specific to blocks, it's also there. Anyways, so I guess I've redefined the issue now to just, to be not CK editor specific, but being that when editing with CK editor in a, well, I don't even know is that switching to source mode, is that part of CK editor? I think it is.
Yeah, the source button is provided by CK editor.
By CK editor, okay.
Own project, yeah.
So when we're using that in a dialogue, you have to switch back in order to not lose your thing. So what I think the next we verified that the next step is this doesn't feel like something I can solve myself, but I would like to help provide some direction, and I'm hoping either Nate or Gregory might have an idea that I can put in the issue saying, here's what we need to do next in terms of debugging and or coming up with a fix for this. Any ideas?
Yeah, so I would theorize that where the root of our problem is when you save a dialogue, it also submits an Ajax request to like submit the form. And we have a JavaScript file, I think it's called dialog.ajax.js that deals with when you're submitting a dialogue with Ajax, that's how the form gets processed. And the problem is likely in that file, probably around when it's dealing with the click handler on the submit button. And so my theory is that we have jQuery is currently acting on behalf of the user to click the real submit button within the form, that the submit button within the dialog is actually just like a copy, like it's like a placeholder that when you click on that, JavaScript clicks on the real button. And I think that we need to try different approaches to submitting the form with JavaScript doing different things. I think that it might be doing something like trying a mouse down event or a click event, and we might need to try other JavaScript events to see which one actually works correctly with CK editor.
Okay.
Or it's possible that right now we're telling it to mouse down, but maybe we should be telling it mouse down and follow with click. You can tell it to do multiple events like in a row, and that might be what is necessary.
Do you think you'd have time to update that issue? Because I'm going to have a hard time translating that.
Okay, I will.
I'm willing to, if you're too busy, I could just rewatch this and sort of type it out.
I will. Well, what I'm going to commit to is I've opened this tab in my browser.
Okay.
And I never close tabs until I have resolved whatever I opened them for.
It'll be great if you could summarize that. If not, I will try to just come back and listen to this again and capture what you said.
Okay. Okay. So that's an interesting one. If you guys don't mind, I'm going to totally take us down a little sidetrack here into a wish list feature that I don't think that we've discussed before. And that is that when we save formatted text areas, right now we save the markup and we save the format. You know, whether it's CK editor or full HTML or filtered HTML or plain text or whatever text format the administrator has set up for the site. I would like to throw out there conceptually that perhaps we should start storing an additional property there about whether or not that was saved in source mode or not. So it would be an additional column in the database that says this format was used, this is the markup, and was source mode enabled at the time that it was saved, so that when you go back and edit that piece of content, it could toggle source mode and use CK editor still, so that if you have pieces of content that you want to have the text format of CK editor and all of the controlling rules of CK editor, but you always edit that piece of content in its HTML source for some reason, probably for a level of control. You don't have to make a new text format specifically that just is the exact same thing with CK editor turned off. And it would remember that you always edit that piece of content in source control, in source mode. Thoughts?
I'd have to think about it some more. It sounds like it makes sense and would be useful. I mean, so basically you're saying this would be like on a node level, right? So
it would be everywhere you save any text. Yeah.
So I can imagine, so is this the use case you're talking about, where on a page, and say on pages, most of my pages, I don't need source mode because I'm not doing anything. But on a particular page, I've found the need to switch into source mode because I'm adding, I don't know, an iframe or something. And then when I save that, next time I come back, it's going to remember that I saved that in source mode, and it will default to source mode then?
Yep.
Like when I go to edit it. So I don't know if this is your use case, but to me, this, you know, and this is sort of because of another bug, maybe, I don't know, but I've run into scenarios where, like, when I add an iframe or something in source mode to something, and then I come back, if I resave it without going into source mode, I lose my my changes. And I think that might be because I don't have my filter set up properly or whatever. But I feel like this would make that less likely because, right, if it's like if I added that iframe in source mode and saved it, it would bring me back to source mode.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's an idea.
I was about to say that I saw that happening, but what I realized now is that it wasn't the source mode in CK editor, but someone has switched to full HTML, and that's what's being remembered. So yeah, I've seen that in big.org, some articles that we've done.
Yeah, one thing you can run into a problem with multiple text formats, though, is that sometimes a second user has different permissions than the first one. And so when they change the text format to something different, the original author might go in and try to edit that piece of content, and they don't have access to the text format that it was changed to. And then they can't change it at all. The field gets locked.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So they don't have access to the field at all.
But where this is coming from is that WordPress, our frequent comparison software, doesn't have the concept of text formats where there's like different levels of permission, but it does have the concept of rich text versus like plain text editing, and it does remember which way a piece of content was saved. But the markup is like the markup controls are always the same regardless of the editing interface you use inside of WordPress. But
my first reaction is I wouldn't mind one way or the other, but I would like others to chat. What they think.
But it could also cause some weirdness again with that two-person editorial situation, whereas the original person might have edited it with rich text mode. The second person might have switched it to HTML mode because they find it more intuitive or whatever, because they're a more advanced editor. And then the first person comes back and edits their content again, and now it's in source mode, and they would be like, whoa, what's going on here? You know, but maybe they would just click the button again. I don't know.
I think we had a similar. I remember a similar thing about field sets, collapsible field sets, and whether like some people find it it's a trivial task and by default they're collapsed, but some others have it as a primary action for some sort. I can't remember specific tasks now. So there was an idea to remember per user which field sets they've expanded or collapsed and just have them like that. But that would imply that things like that saved in its user's profile or something. Because I can't think of any other way that this would work.
Yep. Yeah, we could save it in a session or something like that too, where it's like it would know that this user prefers HTML mode, but yeah.
But you were saying to do it on a per node level, like on specific.
Per piece of content wherever it's saved. My situation is that there are certain pieces of content that are complex and very long, and using CKEditor isn't suitable for them. But I don't want to set up a different text format just for them because I want the permissions to be the same as CKEditor's text format.
Yep. No, I get what you're saying.
All right. Well, maybe that's one of these things that needs to be experienced in order to really evaluate.
Yeah, well, as I said, we are sort of like experiencing it in b.org, where we have multiple people contributing to the articles that we publish, like user guides and so on. And the solution that we resorted to there is the text filter one, but that's it under the assumption that everyone that has access to edit content on b.org actually has access to those text formats.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not an issue for us there because we are being loose on the, you can say we are sort of like being loose on restrictions.
Yep.
Or more permissive.
Okay. Well, thanks for a little sidebar there.
Yeah.
Next up, we have two social justice related issues. Removing blacklist and whitelist from core is issue 4441. And that issue currently needs review. There's a pull request up there. It does have some impact, and I think that that's why it needs review. It's kind of a long pull request. I did see, I think this past week that Linus Torvalds has also committed to removing these terms from both the Linux kernel and from Git software. So that's very exciting. Just I think that I think this is a trend that's really going to stick. Like this has been part of software terminology since we've had software. And I think that finally some recognition of some harmful terminology is finally making some inroads here, and that this might be a permanent change culturally within the software development world.
Yeah, it takes a few generations. It's like we now look at movies or look in the history and say, oh, people were silly back then. They were branding people because they thought they were witches. At some point, I think that their kids or grandkids would say, oh, these guys were silly. They were smoking or whatever. And one of those things, those silly things that we did would be using those words. It seems that to most of us that are socially just, it seems that these words are innocent because we've gotten used to using them in so many years. But yeah, I think this is a move to the right direction. It won't be an issue in a few decades. That's what I'm saying.
Yep.
So the next issue we've got up is very similar to that one. It's removing all master and slave terminology from core. It's issue 4451. Most of this was already removed from core a long time ago regarding database configuration, that we have primary and secondary instead of master and slave. And most of the changes in this issue are updating documentation that still mentions the older terminology or uses it as examples and stuff like that. So 4451 has already been marked RTBC, so that'll be great. I think we'll probably get that in shortly. All right. That's
Nate,
what...
before you move on, I just found the issue about moving the license file is 4485 and a snippet there. And as I say, there's nothing to test or review, it just moves the file. I just filed a pull request real quick. Even if you don't want to commit it and you want to sort of like wait for others to chime in, maybe you can say in the comment that you're fine with it in the issue itself, and then let another committer merge it, or you can do it yourself. It's silly to be having those, like we raised that issue like 2 weeks ago, and we all agree that it's nice to do it. No pull request, so there it is.
Okay.
Yep, I'm making a comment now. So thanks.
Thanks.
That pull request was filed as of 9 minutes ago. Well done. And we can mark this as a milestone and give it PR. Great. All right. Let's see. We'll move on down to, running out of time here, move on down to 117. 117 is the next minor release of Backdrop. That's where we add new features and functionality. We're quickly approaching August, which is our kind of last month of feature development before feature freeze that will be happening on September 1st. So we don't have a whole lot of things that are in the 117 milestone currently. One big feature that could use some eyeballs is Doc Wilmot's work on adding support for custom contexts. It's issue 3750. Custom contexts make it so that we add or restore functionality to layout module so that you can, instead of having a context automatically defined for you, when you're at like node/%, you could make a context appear out of thin air by specifying a particular node from which you want to pull fields, for example, and then place blocks from that node, place fields from that node as blocks on a particular layout. So 3750, I'm excited to see this one. When I get a chance, I will take some time to review it. It currently needs eyeballs just in general. I think that's,
I'm just going to say, from my perspective, what it really needs is somebody who understands it to
Yep.
create some better description of what it does or use cases, because a few of us are really like sort of understand it, but keep getting stuck, and we just need better use cases. So if
Yeah.
anybody out there can do that, please, it would be so helpful.
So what I've done is I tried as part of a follow-up ticket, which serves as a collection of definitions or examples, and I'm trying to put some documentation together. But even for that, I would like eyes on people just to reread what they wrote either on our forum, on our chat, or in various places, and just confirm the terminology being used so that it's not confusing. But I feel that I understand 99% of this feature, but I just don't feel that like the right person to review it. Like it's a little bit, I don't know.
yeah, conceptually, it's a complicated thing. Fortunately, it doesn't impose too much visual weight to a normal user using that part of the site. So it's definitely targeted more towards power user or a site builder of substantial savviness. It does make me think, though, the complexity with which, or the difficulty with which people have been having reviewing this functionality, that the documentation is going to be pretty key. And even describing it verbally has not worked out very well, that we may need to have some like video tutorial or something like that to actually truly demonstrate what this thing is actually doing.
Yeah. So Tim, you're muted. You were trying to say something?
It's just trying to say, so like I made comments about the help text, and there was some feedback that we should just focus on the functionality for now, and we'll deal with this other stuff. But I'm like adding this option, the layouts UI is already complex and a little bit confusing, right? And there's a part of me, that says adding, like you could say, let's just add this feature and worry about documentation elsewhere and stuff. in other places, but in terms of the whole backdrop philosophy, if we're adding an option which just isn't going to make sense to most users, is that a problem, right? Because we're trying to make it something easy to use. And to me, it's like, if I open that up and I see this thing context and I just can't wrap my head around it, is that a step forward or a step backwards, even if it works, right? Even if it works for those who understand it.
Even describing it just doesn't cut it. I think that the agreement was that we'll add. Some people are good at learning by example, so we said that the documentation would include 2 or 3 real-world examples, so that would help people get it. And the help text added just below this UI element would have a brief description and then point to the documentation for more, because it like would overwhelm the UI with so much documentation. Like
is that are we comfortable with that overall as a project, that like if we are introducing something that's really complex, that we can just link to some offsite, or to some documentation? Are we doing that? Are we doing that anywhere else?
Well, as Nate said, it's not that we're imposing it, right? It's a feature that you can use. And I know that a question that I wanted to ask, because Nate described it as instead of. So when you were describing it earlier, Nate, you said instead of having the context automatically being picked up, you now can sort of like make context magically appear. It's not instead, it's on top of. So we still have the ability to automatically detect the context. It's not now that more advanced site builders can use that in a more advanced way. It won't be in the face of people that don't know how to use it. They won't even know that it's there.
I get all of that, but I can totally hear in my head people arguing that the mere fact that if I don't understand it and I open up a layout and there's this option there, and it is pretty prominent, right? It's like you create a new option and it's right there. Nobody cannot see it. If that isn't going to like make people afraid of layouts because they've got this big thing there that they don't even understand, right? And I hear us having discussions all the time saying we don't want to do that, right? We don't want to scare people away with things they don't understand, even if they work and even if they're not hurting anything by being there. Then maybe I'm wrong. Maybe we do that all the time. I don't know.
No, we don't do it all the time, but it's certain things are more difficult. Like,
and it's legit to say this is just powerful enough that it's worth that, that we're willing to accept that trade-off. I'm just not sure if we've.
When this thing was first introduced, what I tried to suggest is that if there's a possible way to, it seems that we're introducing a developy sort of like thing in the UI, and then we ask people to guess what the result would be, or let me rephrase that. A site builder would have something in mind, and they would know that in order to get there, they would need to add the proper context. Experienced site builders know how to do that, but less experienced people would not know it. So my argument back then was that instead of having that workflow of knowing somehow what you need and then adding the context in order to get there, why not reverse that and ask people, what do you want to do? What's the end result? And then generate. But yeah, that gets too complex. It's not as simple though.
Okay.
And
this has been helpful for me.
Yeah,
we can move on.
We have a different issue for that approach, Gregory. I think, right, that that we wouldn't show people anything about contexts when they're setting up the layout, but we would show it if they added a block that needed a context that didn't exist.
Yes.
Which is interesting, but also opens up all kinds of different problems. And it also makes the list of blocks, because it would have every block in the entire system, even if the context wasn't available. Even if it like didn't make sense to apply put like a user's profile picture on a node, for example, because it'd be like, where are you getting the profile picture from? And then it would have to ask you, where would you like to get that from? Which at least currently, because we also don't have relationships right now, could not include exactly what you might expect. Like, oh, I can put a profile picture on there, but it's always going to be exactly of user ID number 10. It's like,
instead of the current user. Yeah.
Instead of being the author of the node, which is what you would want. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And we also have some satellite issues around that, as in creating layouts from a content type. which will apply to that content type, or creating a layout from a specific node, which will automatically figure out what context and what visibility conditions you need. But these are follow-ups all, and I don't see an easy way to simplify that part of the UI. That's
Okay.
Yeah, and for existing patterns, like Backdrop puts itself in this like mid-market space, and one of the defining features of Backdrop is views, for example, and by no, you know, there's no way that we can say that views is like an easy and simple interface. It's that trade-off that you were talking about of like,
Yep.
this is powerful enough that the complexity is worth it because it's necessary.
Yep.
And I do feel that this is one of those areas that this also lays groundwork for other things like the relationships that I was just talking about to make it so that you can make a page contain pretty much anything from anywhere, starting from anything. And so I think as we get more towards that goal, like there will be some additional complexities, but the layout system was intended to have those complexities built into it eventually from the very beginning, considering it was a port from panels from 777. And so this is, in a way, taking what had always been intended. And in some places, I think I've said before that there's literally like sections of code that were commented out in layout module, and Doc Wilmot just uncommented them because he's like, this now works.
Nice.
And so, it's definitely kind of fulfilling.
Yeah.
What
I was about to say
originally for it.
Yeah, I was about to mention panels, which is something that I never touched in D7. So it's one of those things that are very powerful, and people that have used it like cannot live without. And we basically with layouts, with a layout builder, what we've done is we introduced a simple and user-friendly version of it in Backdrop. But certain aspects of it will sort of like they come with complexity that you just cannot get rid of. It's just how it is.
Yeah, but also for offsite documentation, we do have that in places. Honestly, not as much as I would like. Like for views, for example, would be really excellent if we could have more offsite online documentation that showed how to heck to actually use views, because you got dropped into it and you got almost nothing as far as help is concerned. But we do have a fair amount of online documentation in the status report, which is funny. We just mentioned that we need a link off to the documentation from the status report, because a lot of the things regarding server configuration are just like, that's not really, we're hoping that people don't run into that problem, but if they do, we need to provide extensive documentation for it.
Okay. I wasn't sure if we considered that a good thing or a bad thing. It sounds like it, like, is that a UX? Is it a, right, okay. Good summary.
Necessary evil, yeah.
Yeah, where it's necessary, I mean, it's the best option we have, I think, that we try to do in-app help as much as frequently, but the help is usually like no longer than a couple of sentences, usually not even longer than one sentence, because if it's more complicated than one sentence, we send them onto online help.
Good.
And I think that seems to be the pattern that we've been pursuing.
Since views was mentioned, a good example of simplifying the UI, the views wizard is a good example of that. So for a person that just wants to create a listing, they just go, and then when you create a new view, you just ask them very basic things, and they say just list every page type that's out there. Once you save that, you get the end result. But if you want to tweak further, you'll just have to dive into the full views UI. Like, there's no other way.
Okay. Lost my place. Custom contexts. All right. The only other, well, let's give a shout out to using the administration theme for the login form, issue 4410. Jen has been heading this issue up, but it's been stalled. There's just some complexities here around showing the administrative interface and layout to a logged out user that we need to figure out. So that issue is currently on hold, but a spin-off of that issue is moving forward, which is removing the view administration theme permission, which is issue 4487. So that issue currently needs work. There's a discussion there about how that permission doesn't make sense in the current paradigm of there's the administrative backend and then there's the end user front end. The concept of someone being able to access the administrative backend without the ability to view the theme doesn't make sense. And so that issue is working to reduce that weird conflict that can occur where you could not assign the permission but still give someone administration powers. So 4487 is that issue. I think the concept is that we'll make a contrib module to restore that permission.
Yeah, it's
I'm not
already been
sure
created.
what
Yeah, it's already been created.
Well, I think maybe I'll just take a look at that issue. It currently needs some additional work though.
Yeah, one thing worth mentioning is that this permission was introduced. One of the main reasons for introducing it was certain things that needed to be done with the overlay, and we got rid of the overlay in Backdrop, so we don't have that need for it.
All right. Well, that's it for the 117 updates. The initiatives with telemetry headed up by Jeff and ready to wear headed up by Luke. We talked a little bit about ready to wear during the design meeting earlier. Telemetry, we're going to have to get a check-in from Jeff, I think, and just get an overall status report from him because we haven't had anything to report on that for a couple of weeks now. So I'll try to reach out to him and see if we can get just a status update. Okay, we've used up all of our time, mostly with me talking about that completely off the wall text format question. So I appreciate you guys joining the meeting today. Do you guys have anything that you'd like to mention before we close?
Okay.
There's one thing, but it's a big one. Tim, you go first.
I have a small one.
Okay.
And I started to say it and I was muted. It's related to 1.17 and you were asking earlier, like how the initiative might affect core. And we haven't decided this sort of as an initiative, but one thing that I think we do need to do in core that will help the ready to wear initiative is this issue. It's it's 4167, and it's deciding on a way to make CSS improvements to basis without breaking sites. And I want to start focusing on that. We don't need to talk about it today unless anybody has any quick comments on it, but I think I might start to advocate for a solution to this because getting that into core is going to be helpful, I think, to the ready to wear initiative. So I had proposed in the issue summary, there's like 4 different options that we outlined, and it looks like, as I quickly summarize it, that we were moving towards the idea of a supplemental style sheet that somebody could click a configuration to use. So by default, you would get basis as it originally was, and that if you're starting a new project and you want to bring in all of the updates, since then you would manually click a button. And there's a little bit of debate about that yet, but I'd appreciate feedback on that or anybody that can help implement it. It doesn't sound like it's going to be super hard, but okay. I think it's going to open up. There's a whole number of issues that have minor changes to the CSS to fix, but we just don't know how to do them without breaking existing sites. Anyways, so if anyone has any comments, let me know. Otherwise, we can move on, and I'll bring this up next week.
Another one to add to the list for next week is config translation for dynamic things like nodes. It was brought up, I think, inserted by Indigo Zella. So I can't remember who was trying to translate the newly introduced document supporting author and date field that we added for its node type. So we need to figure out how we will introduce that chunk of code that allows to introduce translatable strings in config for things like nodes. So I had, yeah, I'm not going to discuss it now. Maybe we'll just add it to the list because it's a long discussion. But just a simple question: is that all that it would take? Just figuring a way to add this chunk of information in the case of nodes, sorry, content types in its content type config file? Would that be it?
So yeah, if you're talking about like so the submitted byline is now stored in configuration with tokens, right? How you
Yes.
want that to be presented. And
It
sounds like the
supports
problem
token.
is that that's not translated currently. It's always just whatever the
Yes.
user typed in. Yeah.
Yes.
That's
So
a perfect.
the token, yeah, the token is like not just to what needs to be translated is what it's between the tokens. So it could be authored by. So this thing needs to be translated, and then the token, of course, is going to be the token. It's going to be the author name. It's the authored by thing, and on or at for the date or the time that needs to be translated. And this is not possible at the time. I can't remember now the person who sort of like brought up this issue, but I suggested that they go and manually add this chunk of section in their config files just to test out if that adds it to the yeah. I'm not sure if that's
it's not just that, but yeah, that's a great issue, and I don't think it's it is the perfect situation to use config translation, and they should update the config file and say like this. I can't remember quite what the string is. It's like underscore config translation or config translation strings or something like that. That identifies the part within the file that needs to be translated, but it doesn't automatically, when it's output, get the translated version. There's a new option in a config object that normally you say config arrow get, config value. There's another method called get translated. And so where you output it, you also have to say get translated. And then that gets it runs through the locale system and basically runs through T for you. So there's two things. You have to switch get to get translated, and you have to add the line to the config file. So you're halfway there.
Okay.
But yeah, that would be great. We have config translation, but we're not using it very consistently throughout all of core. It doesn't matter too much because everything ultimately runs through T anyway. And so the config translation is an alternative that is superior because it makes it so that the POT extraction module, the like translation string extraction module, can find the default strings that are pulled from config files. And without it, we can't do that. We just get T being run on a variable and we have no idea what's inside of the variable. And so you get the end result is the same, that it runs through the T function, but using translation with config makes it so that we can get more of the strings accurately represented just by parsing the code. And we can't do that with T on a variable. Yeah. Okay. Anything else?
Nope.
All right. Well, thank you guys both for joining, and thanks everybody out there on the internet. We really appreciate this. And yeah, we'll see you guys around. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
So yeah.
Yep.
Bye.